Hello, my name is Ragini Chetri. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology in Salesian College, Sanada. Today, we will be talking about Max Weber and his concept of Verstehen. Before we dive into Max Weber's concept of Verstehen, we shall give you a brief biological Before we dive into the concept of Verstehen, I shall give you a brief biographical sketch of Max Weber. Maximilian Karl Emil Weber was one of the founding fathers of sociology, along with Auguste Comte and Karl Marx. He was born on April 21st, 1864 in Erfurt, Germany. He died in the year 1920 in Munich, Germany. He was a German sociologist, historian, economist, and political theorist. Like I've already mentioned before, he was also known as the founding father of sociology. His major works include The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, which was published in the year 1905, and Economy and Society, which was posthumously published. Max Weber was deeply influenced by the cultural and political upheavals of his time, and the works which he has written reflect all these social and cultural contexts in which he was living. When we are talking about Max Weber, we need to remember that he focused on rationalization, bureaucracy, religion, and social action. But the topic that we will be specifically focusing on today is Verstehen. What is Verstehen? Verstehen is a German word which means understanding or interpretive understanding. When I say understanding, Verstehen is not simply about superficial understanding, but rather it is something which deals with interpreting human action. So when we look at somebody, we get a general analysis of that person. Say for example, if a person is sitting on a chair, sad and forlorn, just looking at him would be understanding. But Verstehen goes beyond that. If we go approach the person and ask him why is he or she sad, and then if we try to find out the reasons as to why he is sad and forlorn and sitting the way he is, that is known as Verstehen or interpretive understanding. When it comes to sociology, Verstehen means grasping meaning behind social action, because when we live in a socio-cultural context, every action that we perform has a meaning associated with it. Like, for example, I am teaching right now, and this social action of teaching also has a meaning attached to it. For example, I am teaching for the viewers to learn this particular topic. When we talk about Max Weber, we need to remember that Verstehen was a key part of Weber's interpretive sociology. All of the theories which Max Weber has written, be it on authority, on religion, on bureaucracy, all of his theories stemmed from the idea of Verstehen. Weber used Verstehen to describe the process of understanding human behavior by putting yourself in someone else's shoes, seeing the world as they see it. So Verstehen is not about sympathizing, but rather it is about empathizing with somebody. You try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand the situation that they are in, to understand the feelings and emotions that they are feeling. This is what Verstehen is all about. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes and looking at the world from their point of view. Why Verstehen matters. In this particular section, we will be talking about why Verstehen became a very important concept in sociological studies. The first reason is that Verstehen as a concept moves beyond what people do to why they do it. Therefore, Verstehen focuses not only on what somebody is doing, but rather it also tries to question why somebody is performing a particular action, why somebody is talking in a particular way, why somebody is behaving in a particular manner. All of these things are answered by Verstehen. So we not only become become observers, but we also become empathetic observers and try to understand the causal factors behind someone's action. And the other reason why Verstehen is important is that it allows us to interpret subjective meaning. When it comes to human beings and social action, each of us have a particular way of dealing with a particular situation. Each and every one of us have a particular way of understanding the world, and each and every one of us have different kinds of meanings that we attach to a particular event that is happening. So, Verstehen helps us to understand the subjective meaning that each and every social actor attaches to their actions that they are performing. This becomes extremely important for studying culture, religion, and social norms, because whenever we are talking about culture, whenever we are talking about religion, and whenever we are talking about the norms or the rules and regulations of the society, it is very important to take note that culture, religion, and social norms differ from community to community, and therefore to truly have an in-depth understanding of somebody's culture, how they interpret their religion, and how they follow the rules and regulations of the society, it is important to understand the subjective meaning that people attach to it. Take, for example, you have a particular rule and regulation which has been crafted for a particular institution. This rule and regulation may not be the same in another institution, and every single institution may have their own reasons for setting up a particular rule and regulation for members who belong to that community or that institution. Therefore, we get a better understanding of how that institution functions in the society. Weber believed that you can't fully explain human action just by observing behavior. You need to understand their intentions, belief, and context. So, when most of the positivist scholars were talking about observation, experimentation, comparison, Weber moved a step beyond by saying that you cannot have a full understanding of people just by observing their behavior. It's like the iceberg in the ocean situation. What you observe above the ocean is just the tip of the iceberg. It is something which is superficial. So to understand what the entire situation is, you have to go beyond just observing what one person is doing. You need to understand the intentions. Why are they doing this particular thing? You have to understand their beliefs, the ideologies that they hold, and the context from which they come from to understand why they are behaving in a particular way. Because each and every one of us as human beings have a unique way of responding to situations, and this unique way of responding to situations comes from the socialization that we've had, the different intentions that we have, the different ideas we grew up with, and the different socio-cultural backgrounds to which we belong. Now we come to the most important section of Verstehen, and that is the different types of Verstehen that Max Weber spoke about. The first type of Verstehen is called Actuals Verstehen, which in English can be translated to direct understanding. Actuals Verstehen is immediate comprehension of an action or an expression. So if I'm sitting here in a dejected pose and you look at me, that is an immediate comprehension of an action or expression. Just by looking at my dejected body language, you will immediately understand that I am feeling hopeless or despondent. So that is direct understanding of what you are observing. And like I've already mentioned, actuals understanding is based on direct observation. You use your vision and sight to look at a situation and try to understand what it is about. Example, seeing someone crying and understanding that they are sad. So this is direct observation. You see somebody crying and you immediately realize that they are sad. The next kind of Verstehen is Erklärendes Verstehen, which can be translated to explanatory understanding. This type of Verstehen is what Max Weber focused on because it provides a deeper interpretive understanding of motives or context behind an action. It aims to uncover why a particular action was performed. Like I've already mentioned earlier, verse the hen focuses more on the why than the what. So, for example, continuing with the previous earlier mentioned example, actual's understanding is when you see a person crying and you understand that they are sad. But eclairandus understanding or explanatory understanding is more about trying to understand why somebody is crying. So here the example says that you understand that someone is crying because they have just lost their job, or I'm standing in a despondent and dejected manner because I feel sad about my pet dying last night. So to understand why a person is performing that particular action, why a person is speaking in a particular way, why a person has a particular body manner is what eclairandus verse the hen is about. Weber distinguished between simply observing a behavior, actuals verse the hen, and uncovering the meaning and motive behind it, eclairandus verse the hen. The second form is more analytical. It tries to explain the action within a broader web of beliefs, values, and intentions. So, like every other theory which has been propounded, Max Weber's theory of verse the hen also received its shares of criticism, and also many other scholars have pointed out limitations to Max Weber's concept of verse the hen. So, first thing is subjectivity, risk of misinterpreting motives. So, when we are talking about subjective behavior, the major criticism that comes is we as human beings have a risk of misinterpreting motives, or we may be at a risk of saying some things to people or sharing something to people which can easily be misinterpreted by the person who is listening to it. And whenever we talk about verse the hen, and whenever we talk about its focus on subjectivity, the other limitation that comes about is it becomes very difficult to verify or generalize the observations to a larger sample of people, because when we are talking about subjectivity, the way I am feeling may be different to the way you are feeling, and it may be different to the feelings of 10 other people in the room. So it becomes very difficult to come to conclusions when we are talking about verse the hen, because it focuses more on the subjective meaning of the actor rather than the objective meaning. Now, the third limitation that we can talk about when we are talking about verse the hen is it depends on cultural and linguistic context. And because verse the hen depends on cultural and linguistic context, it becomes very vague for people outside the cultural and linguistic context to understand the actions of the actors. Some critics say that verse the hen is too interpretive or not scientific enough. This is a debate which has been going on in sociology for a very long time, and it's the debate of objectivity versus subjectivity. So most of the scholars who focused on the positivist aspects of sociology, where we try to understand the social world using the methods of the natural sciences, they say that when we are interpreting the world according to verse the hen, it becomes very interpretive and not scientific enough, because instead of focusing on the objectivity aspect of our lives, we will be focusing more on the subjectivity aspects. However, regardless of this criticism, it is very important to remember that verse the hen is extremely crucial for depth and richness in social research, because whenever we talk about sociology, we are talking about human beings, we are talking about the lives we live, we are talking about the everyday phenomenon that takes place in our life, and all of these aspects cannot be studied solely from a scientific point of view. It is important to use interpretive techniques to get a deeper understanding of society and the richness which it holds. The next thing that we are going to talk about is the legacy of verse the hen. Verse the hen as a concept influenced qualitative methods, like we've already said, whereas objectivity focuses on quantitative methods. Verstehen as an interpretive, subjective method focused and influenced qualitative methods in sociology, and Verstehen acted as a precursor to interpretive and symbolic interactionist theories, which later developed in the 20th century. And not only this, Verstehen had the biggest legacy in terms of helping the concept of agency to hold roots in the world of sociology, because Verstehen saw individuals as someone with agency, with the will to decide and act on their own. Even today, Verstehen shapes how we do sociological research, especially in areas like culture, religion, and identity, because not everything that we see, not everything that we try to study can be quantified. Not everything is measurable. So Verstehen helps us to see the qualitative and subjective aspects of the society. And this is the end of today's video lecture, where we learned about Max Weber's concept of Verstehen. Thank you.